Blackhawks fans, welcome into Hawks Happy Hour with the Four Feathers podcast. It's Gianni with Ron Luce coming at you. A little crack-em action here on a Friday afternoon. Ron, cheers. Happy hour, my friend.
Cheers, my friend. Happy hour to you as well. It feels like an eternity since I've been on the microphone talking Blackhawks hockey. But what better day to do it than a little Hawks Friday happy hour, Johnny? It's a great way to start off the second day of the weekend, because in case you didn't know, weekend starts at Thursday here at Four Feathers Podcast.
Exactly. You know the rules, Ron. But yeah, it's been a little bit since we've been in this time slot for a Hawks happy hour, and especially on a Friday here. So we hope you enjoy some beverages. Get in the comment section over on YouTube. It's youtube.com/OnTapSportsNet. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff there. You can also find us on Facebook at OnTapSportsNet, on X, and over at Four Feathers Pod on X and Instagram as well. OnTapSportsNet.com is the place to go for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Crack 'em, Ron. I'm ready to jump in, discuss some Blackhawks stuff. We've got a lot of exciting news. Obviously, Connor Bedard is back, baby. We've got a few games. The tank is rolling on wonderfully. We've got the Lukas Reichel saga still going on. I feel like that's been all year thing, just like the injury report, which we'll touch on as well. We've got a good ruffle some feathers and stick taps, our usual segments. And per usual, take a look at what's on tap next. So, Ron, let's kick it off. The title of this episode, Connor Bedard is back, baby. That was huge news coming out yesterday.
Yeah, massive news, Johnny. And I think on top of it, what made it so interesting was, like, we had been sitting here having these conversations kind of internally and over the internet a little bit, right, about our picks we made. When's Bedard going to be back? Is it against the Flyers on national TV? Is it against the Jets on Friday night before the big game on the 25th? Is it the Chelios game when we get a Bedard sighting? No, he's instead said, no, guys, I'm like 4 games ahead of schedule here. And he pops back up against, again, a guy that he has made it very clear that he sees as an idol of his, a guy that he looked up to from a hockey standpoint, Sidney Crosby. I think that maybe had something to do with it too, Johnny. He wasn't going to miss an opportunity to play against Sid the Kid.
Yep, right. And, he's been itching to come back. That because ever since it was, he got injured on that Friday, January 5th, and then that Monday is when he had a surgery. But then a week after that, on that Monday, he returned to the ice in non-contact capacity, obviously, and limited in what he could do. But he had seemingly been on the ice and not left it since that date. And he was just itching to get back. And once again, like me and Tony talked about last week, it seemed like Luke Richardson was answering the same questions, just trying to figure out different wording, what to say, because it was contingent on the bones healing and the doctor's appointments and all of that. Well, he got that doctor's appointment expedited because this next one is supposed to be on Monday the 19th, which is coming up here after the weekend. And he got that pushed up here. And obviously, I think it was Wednesday because they did run him through some contact stuff on Thursday. I know that was a concern with a lot of people. Oh, well, he's just jumping right back into game action. Didn't have any, contact. Well, it came out. Emily Kaplan had reported that there was a side session that took place. So it wasn't public because our usual reporters weren't there, Ron. It was Elliot Friedman breaking the initial news, and then it kind of trickled out throughout the day. So I just got to say, I was shocked. Were you?
Yeah, I was also kind of taken back by it too. And it was, again, I think we had all comfortably settled in that he was going to be back middle to late next week. Like, that was, I think, what everybody expected. It was really trending toward you being correct of him coming back against the Flyers. So I think, like, me personally, and I think a lot of other fans too, Johnny, got comfortable with the idea that he was going to be back then, and we were going to have to kind of grind our way through these last couple games of without, number 98 on the ice. And, to see him come back, and I think on top of it, Johnny, see him come back and still make a difference on the ice right away was a nice, pleasant surprise that I admittedly did not. I had this game on the calendar regardless because I enjoy going when they play the Penguins. Again, they're one of the best teams over the same time period as the Hawks had been. Obviously, Sidney Crosby. There's, 5-6 Hall of Famers on that team. Like, this was a game I had on my calendar for quite some time, and it worked out perfectly that Bedard returns and obviously makes a difference on the ice, which was cool to see, despite it not helping, of course, in the tank standings, as we so noted.
Yeah, right. So we'll get into a few of these games here. Obviously, Connor Bedard is returning, is the headliner here. But talking about this tank rolling on, Ron. Since we last talked here, there's been 3 games and all losses. I think Tony and I, set it up for 2 the last time, so we had in this Penguins loss here as well. And on Friday against the Rangers last week, they play hard. You get goals from Vlasic, Foligno, Dickinson. Take it to overtime, so there's a point there. It's not a complete pointless streak here, but it is an 8-game losing streak. And then you got a bad effort against Vancouver on that Tuesday game, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the Pittsburgh game here. But Ron, it felt like outside of that effort that they did, like I said, they played hard against the Rangers on that game last Friday. But man, Luke Richardson clearly was not happy with what went down Tuesday against Vancouver.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny, for him to have them, do a conditioning practice effectively is what it felt like after. And Richardson even came out and said that they planned on having an off day, but he deemed their effort was not worthy of an off day, and they didn't get one. And I appreciate the fact that Richardson still feels like he can kind of, I guess I'll use the term discipline for lack of a better word, but at least just send a message to these guys and say, look, guys, like, I get it. We're down bad. The injury list looks like a freaking, a laundry list of what everybody wants to eat from their favorite restaurant when we order out with a family of 12 every single night. I understand that. I understand that, the season's not going the way they had planned. But Richardson made it very clear last year what the expectation was. And I think they honored that expectation very well in terms of how they played teams, even though they still finished third to last in the NHL in terms of overall record. This year, it's a completely different story. You would think they would be better, and I think they would have been had a lot of these injuries not happened. But Richardson still expects these guys to come out and play hard, and he made it very clear. And I think it sent a message, because I don't think they played that horrifically against Pittsburgh. I think they were just purely outmatched, and I think Pittsburgh had some bounces go their way that ultimately cost the Hawks some goals. But overall, man, I think the message was made, and I think that's also a testament, though, to how much this locker room respects Luke Richardson and continue to respect Luke Richardson despite it being an awful season.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting when these instances flare up, because I think you could look at a few other games and say, oh, well, wouldn't that be the drop the hammer game, so to say? I feel like, while this is, probably waning on the players a little bit, I mean, it's tough without your best player in the mix like it has been for the better part of the past month and a half, right? It wears on the coach too, right? Because he's still got to go there and he's got to answer all the questions about it. And, regardless of if everybody knows the situation, it's still the NHL. It's still a results-based league, right? And I'm looking at it right now. It's been almost a month since the Blackhawks won a game, right? That kind of thing really, really wears on you. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think it is kind of a testament to the fact that, the guys do respect Richardson. And, when things get to a point where he's not satisfied with it, then you're going to have a response like that. And I don't think you're going to get anything from the players like complaining about it or whatever, like maybe some like Torts or Babcock situations of, yesteryears with their respective teams. And you've heard issues that have arisen, maybe Daryl Sutter up in Calgary years past. But I don't think we're going to get to that point here, although there is an interesting little wrinkle here in an ongoing saga that we're going to talk about in a little bit, Ron. But let's wrap up the last game here in this loss against Pittsburgh. Arvid Soderblom gets the start, which I was kind of surprised to see. I thought the Hawks would have put maybe their full best foot forward here. If you're having Bedard back, have Mrazek in net, and then just give Soderblom that game matinee coming up on Saturday. But they go to him in this one, and, not all his fault entirely. I think Seth Jones and Alex Vlasic had an absolutely brutal game. The Penguins found a way to attack that top pair, and they eviscerated him. Seth was -4, Alex Vlasic -3. Terribly out of position on that very first shift that led to the Crosby redirect there. So, not all Soderblom's fault, but at the same time, you'd like to see him get that glove up on the goal that comes streaking down the right side, even if there was a little bit of a bust in coverage there. But other than that, I think Bedard had a rough first period getting back into the mix. But after that, he returned to like his normal form, and he dished a beautiful assist, saucy, over to Philip Kurashev for the Hawks' lone goal.
Yeah, what a beautiful play, especially to see it in person. I think that made it all the difference, truly, Johnny, with Connor Bedard. It was you could definitely tell in the first period that he was kind of feeling it out still, right? He didn't look lost necessarily, but he just didn't have that same pep in his step. But he came out in that second period and they looked like a different hockey team. And it kind of brought some life back, I think, into the team and into the arena, Johnny. All of a sudden, there was a buzz in the UC that I think had been severely lacking for the better part of the last 5 weeks. With all that in mind now, that play was a beauty. And he almost had a couple more. A couple of those shots on goal easily could have found the back of the net that he had throughout the game. 4 shots on goal in his return. That play, though, to Kurashev, it's funny because, Johnny, we had a good little betting night. We would have had a good little betting night, but the hockey gods didn't want to let Connor Bedard score in his return. But we had a Philip Kurashev goal on the docket, and I said if there's any line that's going to be able to structure some offense against the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's going to be Connor Bedard with his old buddy Philip Kurashev, and they did exactly that. Just a silky little sauce pass. Kurashev's wide open. It's the easiest shot he's going to have of his life to just tuck it in behind the goaltender. It was Nedeljkovic for the Penguins on Thursday night. What a beauty. What a highlight for Connor Bedard to return to. And again, he continues to pace the team in goals, even though he's only played like 40 games this entire season. So
right. And you go and look at it, and sure, the final score, the discrepancy is a little bit bigger than what it was in the previous games. We were talking about a 2-goal loss against Vancouver. Sure, the overtime with a solid effort. Before that, against the Rangers previously, you felt like there was more of an opportunity to get back in this game, though, just because of Connor Bedard's presence. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to bring a little bit of attention really quick to what you just said, Johnny, that the end score doesn't tell the whole story, because it really didn't in this game.
There was an empty netter. So
there was an empty netter, but there was also, I think Luke Richardson gave Bedard the opportunity to get the start, to get that pump from the crowd when they announced his name. Because I think if they had it their way, the Dickinson line starts that game, not Connor Bedard.
Right.
With Sidney Crosby on the ice. And they paid, because right out the jump, 15 seconds into the game, Crosby's wide the hell open in front of the net and is able to tip that Pettersson shot over Soderblom's shoulder for a goal. And you're already in the hole 1-0, 15 seconds into the game. Do you look at the rest of the course of the game? It's a 2-1 hockey game if you take away the empty netter. And they woke up. They put, I think 4 consecutive shots on goal before Pittsburgh got another one. They responded. They were like, oh shit, we got to wake up and play. Like they put one in on us, and we're not even a minute into this game yet. I think that took them a little bit by surprise, and they started playing the matchups that Richardson wanted, and it worked out. I mean, at the end of the day, who was the thorn in their side in this game? It wasn't Riley Smith. It wasn't Brian Rust on the fucking empty netter. It was Sidney fucking Crosby potting 2 goals and looking at the kid and saying, hey, I know you're the next one, but I still got it. And he took it to the Hawks last night, and that's ultimately the difference in this one. But the Hawks probably played one of their best games, Johnny, that I've watched in probably the last 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks of hockey from the Chicago Blackhawks.
It's very simple. 98's back, and like I said, that gives you that threat there. It gives you offense. It gives you rush chances. In the other games, you might have had like a shot discrepancy, a chance discrepancy. You're looking more even with these teams, just because 98 is back on the ice. It's very simple. It was great to see him back in action. Hopefully we can get a win here. I don't want to go a month between wins. I do understand the tank, and we're going to talk about where we stand in that, tankathon.com, which has now become another regular visit for me, just like it was towards the end of last year. But, just for morale, man, like I talked about Luke Richardson having to wear it. I talked about the guys in the room having to wear it. That shit wears on you. So, let's maybe take it to the Senators on Saturday, but we'll talk more about the upcoming slate. But tank update real quick here. We're at NHL worst, 14, 37-3, 31 points. Now a 4-point lead on San Jose, because they decided to have a goal scoring outburst, I believe, against Calgary last night, was it? But whoever late game they played, they won, and they scored like 6 goals. So Blackhawks are in control of this thing. And I will say I did not go and look at who has games in hand or whatnot, but right now sitting pretty, Ron.
Indeed, sitting pretty. And again, I think if we were sitting here at the beginning of the season, Johnny, and looking at this roster, and we're like, yeah, they're probably going to have a top 10 pick, maybe a top 12 pick still in the upcoming draft. But overall, they're probably going to be much better. The injuries have helped the tankathon more so than anything, in my opinion, because it's been the quality of the injury, not the quantity of the injury, in my opinion, right? It's not like it's no offense to these players, but it's not Boris Kachuk getting hurt. It's not Mackenzie Entwistle getting hurt. It's not, even Taylor Radish to an extent getting hurt. It's Bedard. It's Foligno. It's Murphy. It's Jones for that small period of time. It's Andreas Athanasiou and Taylor Hall, who were probably arguably going to be two of your highest scoring players on this year's team, assuming they play all 82 games. It's those guys that have been getting hurt. And what was the terminology that Tony used yesterday? It was slacking for Macklin was the new one. Instead of there's no longer the play hard for Bedard or whatever we used last year. It's now slacking for Macklin because Macklin Celebrini would look really good. With Connor Bedard next season.
You brought up our co-host Tony, who could not be on the show today, but I love now after every Blackhawks loss, that's one game closer to Macklin Celebrini's Blackhawks debut. And you know what? I love the optimism, and there are a lot of people that are really high on Macklin Celebrini, which understandable because like Connor Bedard was last year, he's the consensus, right? Number one overall pick in this draft, maybe not as generational label as Connor Bedard had, but 100%. Just for this class in 2024, he is the leader by far. I'm going to stay on my stance that I was even last year, though, Ron. I'm not going to just bank on the ping pong balls favoring us here because I think it'd be pretty wild if that happened back-to-back years. And then you would be talking about some serious rigged, we talk a lot about the NFL scripted during that season that became a meme, a joke, and the league even embrace it themselves. You might be walking down that path if you're here. So I am not going to completely write it in with ink, put Macklin Celebrini is going to be a Blackhawk yet. I hope he is, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the same approach as I did last year, not expecting us to win it. So then I can only be, pleasantly surprised if we get it.
I was going to say, and just to quickly add to that too, right? At least the one thing that the Blackhawks and fans can take in and say, okay, hey, at least this is good, even if they don't get the number one spot. As of now, you cannot pick worse than 3. You are going to get one of the top 3 talents in this coming draft. And there's some really good players. Ron Luce has admittedly started his scouting on the upcoming NHL draft. And there are guys that are going to make this, could still make this Blackhawks team much better. So at least there's solace in knowing, hey, the Hawks are picking in the top 3. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you still have a top 2 pick and you're in the lottery. And even if it's not Celebrini, maybe it's a guy like Demidov or somebody of that nature that you add to this group. Or maybe, again, we told you last year at the beginning of the show, how do you get through the year knowing they're going to suck? Be nice to your ping pong balls. They might reward you at the end of the season, and we're going to feel the same way this year.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. So you talked about, possible young up-and-coming talent there. Let's talk about a guy who's here right now, but isn't really doing much to help give solace in the Blackhawks' future, and that's Lukas Reichel. This saga has started since basically the beginning of the year. I believe it was early November when we first brought it up here, and now we've got another chapter. He had an assist. He was +1 versus Vancouver, but then he was out of the lineup, out of the mix completely in Wednesday's practice. Ended up being a scratch versus Pittsburgh, and John Dietz reports today that Reichel is not expected to play Saturday versus Ottawa here. So we're getting some more tough love treatment from Luke Richardson, which we've talked about on the show past. I'll read you his quote from that practice when he was, Reichel out of the mix there. And I just want to hear your reaction to this. All right. Richardson says regarding Reichel, we realize when players are down on themselves and we don't want to pile it on, but it's the NHL. We have to somehow push them to get over that. And that's a lot. And a lot of that's internally with the player. We can only do so much. He's putting the onus on 27 here.
Yeah. And I think... I think we've talked about it a lot, Johnny. This has been a confidence issue, it seems like, all year, because he just hasn't. You said it yourself, and you put it perfectly just earlier in this episode. It's a results-based business. That's how it is in the NHL. And Yeah, Reichel's had games where he's flashed and he looks like the Reichel of last year that I think gave fans so much optimism, but the results aren't there. And as a result, Luke Richardson still needs to try to win hockey games. That's his job as the coach. Yes, they're quote unquote tanking, but that's a front office job. That's not a head coach's job. He's putting out the best 12 forwards every game of night. And if Lukas Reichel right now is that 13th man on the roster, which more often than not, it seems to be that way, then they have to do it. I will say, Johnny, though, we are inching ever closer to the stretch in Rockford needs to happen. It needs to come, even if it's for like 5 games. Send him down there, let him just play first line minutes and do what he needs to do to get some kind of swagger back, and then give him a chance when he comes back if he gets it figured out. Because right now, Lukas Reichel is continually putting himself, Johnny, in a category where, he's probably going to be maybe a trade chip, dare I say, at the deadline if a team thinks a change of scenery is exactly what he needs. 98 says here in the comments, 27 would be in Rockford if we didn't have all the injuries. And we're going to talk a little bit about those injuries, Johnny, but I think there's a little bit of relief coming on the injury front that might actually promote for number 27 to go down to Rockford and get some time down in the AHL.
Right. I was just going to, you know what, for the most part, I am in Luke Richardson's camp here. I've seen a lot of people on the social media apps, kind of question Luke Richardson's reasoning behind this. Oh, well, quit playing him with dog water. Quit, you're not even giving him a chance. Well, guess what? Lucas Reichel had the chance to step up and be a guy throughout all the year. He got his first line, or excuse me, not first line. He got a center, position, and he did not fare well in that, and we figured, okay, maybe a move back to wing is there, and he still played with some skilled players when some guys are still healthy, and it didn't really pan out there. Well, then you have all the injuries on top of it, and if he's really a guy that's going to flash, you're going to at least see it sometimes there. Like when we talk about an okay game for Reichel, that's what we're talking about. Maybe an assist, maybe a +1. Other than that, it's basically unnoticeable on a night-to-night basis. And I'm sorry, but you got to do something to flash there if you're really going to be a part of this thing in the future. And Ron, I've kind of reserved myself. I would agree. I would think the last step here in this process is a Rockford send down. We'll talk about the injury situation that may allow for that in a second here when we get to the injury report. But we're running out of time here just with the season's going to be coming to an end, in early April. And obviously there's only so many games with Rockford available for a send down there. And maybe that can jumpstart things. That's the final hope here. But it may just be, you may just have to reserve yourself to the fact that he's not part of the picture for this front office and for this head coach, because he was part of the previous regime's pick there. And it was essentially, he was the best player available in a weird COVID year draft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that needs to continue to be taken into account. And Johnny, there's a weird statistic out there, and it's truly bananas in so many ways at the end of the day. The odds of a player who's drafted outside of the top 10 in the first round of sticking in the NHL are the same statistical odds as a player who was drafted in the third round of the NHL draft.
Wow.
It's not as big of a guarantee as people think. Like, yeah, great. It's a first round pick, but look at just across the league. Look at this Blackhawks team. Alex Vlasic wasn't a first round pick. He was a second round pick. Isaac Phillips wasn't a first round pick. He was a late round pick. Just because where you're drafted doesn't guarantee you're going to work out. But it also doesn't mean Lukas Reichel's not going to be a good hockey player. It just might not be in Chicago. It happened with Kirby Dach. I'm a firm believer that the first thing that Davidson said to himself with Dach was, this kid needs a change of scenery, because he was not developed properly by the first regime. And they gave it to him. They sent him to Montreal. They got a really good player in Frank Nazar out of it, who many people have high hopes for now coming into the future. It might just be that way with Rockford. And 98 here is saying, what he asked, what kind of contract could they offer for Lukas Reichel? A 2-year, $1 million type contract. I don't think it would be two-way. I don't think it physically can be two-way, because he would have to sign for less than $1 million if it's going to be a two-way deal. I think it could be a 1 or a 2-year deal at maybe $1 million, $1.5 million. I would think the Brandon Hagel contract is what I'd say. Maybe just without the term, it would be 3 years. They might give him another opportunity next year. The Blackhawks also might get an opportunity, Johnny, to make a trade to improve their hockey team. And it might require Lukas Reichel going the other way to a team that thinks they can develop him. So I think people have latched on to Lukas Reichel being a part of the future for this Blackhawks team, and that every prospect's going to work and it's all going to be great. And that's just not the case.
Right.
You know, we got the one, right? Connor Bedard's the one that everybody's confident in that's truly going to work. Guys that are drafted in the middle of the first round, late in the first round, like this Tampa pick coming up this year, which is currently sitting in 2021 is the spot. Oliver Moore, not to say Oliver Moore's not going to be a decent hockey player, but he might not be a top 6 talent like everybody expects him to be. Got to have a little more patience with these guys because the development is more key for players like that, like where Lukas Reichel was drafted versus a guy like Connor Bedard, who was the consensus number 1 and deemed a generational player before he even got to the draft.
Yeah. All right. Well, talking about what could potentially fix Lukas Reichel, I think a lot of people are in agreement that stint in Rockford could do the trick, or at least it's worth a shot. I'm in that camp as well. While he's still here, you might as well. Honestly, Ron, I would have liked to seen him down there right now because the Rockford Ice Hogs play the Wolves tonight. They've got the Grand Rapids Griffins tomorrow, and then they've got a couple of midweek games here too, a Monday and a Wednesday. So maybe that could be the case if Anthony Beauvillier returns. We'll talk about him first on the injury report here. He was finally back in full participant in practice here today on Friday. He's been out with a left wrist injury. I think he broke that thing clean if you go and look at the replay of that game early in January against Nashville, but not going to play Saturday. Richardson said there's a chance, though, that Monday could be his return. And if that happens, do you think that's time that you send Lukas Reichel down?
I think it is because the Ice Hogs play on Monday. It's a very odd Monday night game for the AHL. You take away the 2 games, Johnny, this weekend, the Ice Hogs still have 26 games left in the season. That's a lot of hockey where Lukas Reichel can play even half of those, maybe get a little bit of his swagger back and maybe make an appearance late in the season to give the Blackhawks a little kick in the ass offensively. I think as soon as Beauvillier gets back, a guy that we all can probably sit here and confirm is a top 9 forward, as soon as he gets back, I think it's time to say, Lukas, we need you playing. You're not doing yourself any favors not being on the ice. You're going down to Rockford. You're going to play number 1, line minutes, whether it's at wing or center. I could give a rat's ass at this point. But a short bus ride to Rockford, Illinois, going west is, I think, very soon in Lukas Reichel's future.
All right. Yep. I can see it as well. So we'll talk about some other injuries here. I wrote up a little post over on tapsports.com. You can go and check it out for the text version of it. But Ron, as we just go through alphabetically here, we talked about Beauvillier already. Anthony C, who is back skating with the side group. I was surprised to see because Luke Richardson felt like he had been saying soon. And we finally got it. He's still not back in full contact practices, but good sign, I guess, there, even though some believe that he should just be shut down for the season. We'll see what develops on that front. We know Hall's out for the season. Seth Jones missed practice today due to maintenance. I don't think anything's wrong with there. Maybe a little bit of a bruised ego after being -4 on Tuesday, or excuse me, on Thursday against the Penguins. Connor Murphy, kind of a mysterious one here. He's day-to-day. They didn't put him on IR. But he has not returned since from before the All-Star break, even though they said he could potentially join that trip. So I don't know what's going on with Murph there. You've got Taylor Radish day-to-day, missed practice Friday, and then Nikita Zaitsev, no update on him. He's on the shelf there. Ron, anything on those? Like I said, Connor Murphy's kind of a mystery for me. Are we getting the Andreas Athanasiou treatment for a defenseman here?
We could be. And I think Connor Murphy is a guy that they don't want to rush back just because of the nature of the game he plays. I do have one note to add on Radish. Radish left yesterday's game, came back, but you could definitely tell he went down to the ice and he was really slow to get up. And he just kind of fell awkwardly. I don't know how he got hit. So to see it reported as a quad, it makes sense given kind of the way he reacted to it. Be interesting to kind of monitor him, I think, because he's got a lot to play for, in my humble opinion. But I'm Johnny, I think out of all these injuries, I want to see Andreas Athanasiou a little bit this season because if nothing else, man, I want to see that speed. Put him on Bedard's wing for like 10 games and just watch what those two do together when they just physically outskate everybody on the ice. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and you're paying $4.25 million a year.
Nice number.
So, yeah, you'd like to get at least some of that recouped, right?
100%.
In terms of seeing him just quite literally just for the speed and the offensive skill that he can bring, even though there were some issues with defensive positioning and whatnot earlier on in the year. Never been known as a defensive player, though, but I go back to that dollar figure that you're paying him. I'd like to see him back out on the ice at some point here. Right. I just hope for Taylor Raddysh's sake that, because he's had a rough go of it too, only 11 points through 49 games, but I don't want him to be the guy now that he has to go back on the shelf here since he was on IR a little bit earlier in January. I don't want that injury to be something that delays a potential Lukas Reichel send down here. I'm sick of it. Let's just get Reichel down to where he needs to be to get some minutes in there. And you know what? If Taylor Raddysh doesn't go on IR, but just sits and watches from the press box for 4-5 games, then so be it, because I don't want to delay this shit anymore. So that'll wrap up our injury report here at Four Feathers. You're locked in with us, Hawks Happy Hour on February 16th here. Ron, time for our weekly segment, Ruffle Some Feathers. I'll open the floor up to you. Go ahead first, because mine's a little bit longer-winded.
I like it. I'm excited to hear yours, Johnny. But this is just more of a PSA, I think, for Blackhawks fans. There are, outside of guys that wear numbers 98, 55, 4, 5, 71, 17, 16, and 89, don't get attached to anybody. Oh, and 72, that guy too. He's not going anywhere. Don't get attached to anybody. I've been doing a lot of side work. I'm hoping there's a lot of content that's coming as a result of this, especially as we inch toward the off season in the summertime. There's a lot of very easy, you can truly look at this and say, what have you done for me lately? There's probably a lot of guys that aren't back with this Blackhawks team next year. I like a guy like Colin Blackwell. I just don't think there's space for him, because they're going to want to give guys like Landon Slaggert and Frank Nazar opportunity next year. Mackenzie Entwistle is a guy that we love very personally here at Four Feathers. Is he willing to take a depth role, or does he want to try and go somewhere else? He might not be here next year. Boris Kachuk, who, Johnny, you and I are very, very adamant fans of, he might not be here next year. And I think the one that hurts the most of all of them, because of what he was supposed to become, and I think what we got a slight taste of last season as a 20-goal scorer, Taylor Raddysh might not even be here next season.
He's playing his way out of it.
He really is. He went from a 20-goal scorer, 37 points. I get it. He's not a guy that's going to set people up. He's a finisher. He's a big body. He's a power forward. That's fine. If he's given me 20 goals a season, I would have happily turned around if I was Kyle Davidson again. If after 2 potential 20-goal seasons said, hey, kid, here's $4 million for the next 3 years. Let's run it back and see what you can do. You're young enough yet. Taylor Raddysh might have his rights traded on draft night for a pick at this point. I mean, it's getting into that territory. And I think Raddysh is the one that I'm the most disgruntled by, Johnny.
And this is the biggest disappointment when we had our 50 in here. Yeah,
he was, and he still continues to be. He showed that he can score in the NHL. 20 goals last year, with a lot of those coming down the stretch when this team wasn't very good, is not a fluke. He's clearly a guy that can put the puck in the net. But it seems like there are so many guys, a guy that we talked about ad nauseum here in Lukas Reichel, a guy like him, so many guys that had really good seasons last year, Johnny, that just have not lived up to the billing in year 2. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the league got film on them and they figured out how to shut them down, right? Like the hey, you got to adjust to everybody adjusting to you. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to warn everybody, because we like to, we find players we enjoy watching and, I like that guy. I'd like to see him stick around. There's a lot of these guys that might not stick around. And it's not even because of they're just not good enough. That's part of it. But it's going to be a hell of a numbers game, Johnny. I got it down to where there were only 3 slots on this team that I couldn't fill for next year with people in the system and in the organization already. 3. And they said they're probably going to spend on some guys, but it'll be those, 2-year deals in that $4 to $5 million range where they can clear the books when Bedard's due for a new contract. You can still upgrade. You can still get some goal scorers in here. More on that later. But there's going to be a lot of guys that are not going to be here. Don't get attached to anybody that isn't under contract beyond this season, because they probably won't be here.
And if you're attached to Lukas Reichel, I'd recommend undoing some of the straps there, because I wouldn't be sad one bit. In fact, I'd probably crack a beer if Lukas Reichel was not on this team moving forward. It might be a little bit cynical on my part.
Johnny, if you're a diehard Lukas Reichel stan right now, and that opinion is keeping your Blackhawks sanity together, please go watch Connor Bedard highlights on repeat for the next 27 hours to make up for the fact that 27 might not be here next year, because he really is playing himself out of a position on this Blackhawks team. I hate to say it, but it's entirely true.
Yep. All right. Since GM Ron got out of the bag there, we got to ask one question that came in earlier. Do the Hawks offer sheet? Elias Pettersson, 98, chiming in again here.
No chance. As cool as it would be to see a guy like Elias Pettersson in Chicago, the offer sheet compensation, folks, for a team that's rebuilding does not make sense. And if you're not familiar, I'm not sitting here and judging, because I get it. Not everybody's as much of a nerd as me and sits on Cap Friendly for multiple hours a day. I understand that. I read a bunch of the collective bargaining agreement language. I do all that really nerdy shit. Elias Pettersson, based on what he would cost, dollar figure wise, because that's how they determine compensation with RFAs. It's a dollar compensation window based on the AAV of the contract. Like, this window to this window is this compensation. This one to this one, this compensation. He's probably going to get 8 figures, $10+ million a year. That's 4 first-round draft picks. There's no way in hell Kyle Davidson is giving away 4 first-round draft picks when this team has a lot of things that still need to go right. If they were a little closer to contention, if they had a little bit deeper of a prospect pool, because maybe Stan drafts a little better than he actually fucking did, then maybe I think there is a world where they say, you know what, screw it. Or at least they could call Vancouver and say, hey, we know you're not going to sign him. Let's talk about a package that would work here, because a lot of people don't like offer sheeting. It's kind of looked at as a very poo-poo thing, especially in the NHL.
What's the last major one? Was it Sebastian Aho? Is that the last saga that we got? Offer sheet, big name wise.
So the best, it involved Aho. So for those that don't know, Sebastian Aho, Carolina Hurricanes, got offer sheeted by the Montreal Canadiens. And it was pretty much the Canadiens daring the new owner of the Hurricanes, who's considered a cheap bastard, to pay up. And he did. He said, yeah, we're going to pay Aho, because they had a bunch of weird escalators and he was due certain dollars at signing. And it was a contract to essentially say, if you're going to actually be an owner, you need to act like it and pay. And they did. And they turned around, the Carolina Hurricanes turned around a year later, offered Jesperi Kotkaniemi a 1-year deal, just enough where the Canadians couldn't keep him under the cap. So he actually had to go, and then they signed him to a long-term deal for less money, just to spite the Montreal Canadiens for Sebastian Aho. It was one of the most beautiful things ever. But I can promise you right now, you will never see the Canadiens and Hurricanes have clean agreements ever again. And that's why a lot of teams don't do it. So it'd be cool to see Pettersson in Chicago, unless they can trade for his rights and then sign him to a deal. But even then, that package is going to be absurd. And I don't think the Hawks, have the talent to give away that's NHL ready without totally depleting their team. And B, Kyle Davidson's collecting draft picks like groceries right now to put in the cupboard, not trying to give them away to everybody that doesn't need them, like the Vancouver Canucks. So Pettersson would be cool, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
All right, I had to ask since GM Ron was out of the bag there, like I said. So thanks, 98, for the questions. You can jump in comment section over on YouTube or Facebook or X and let us know your thoughts, drop questions, and just like that. All right, Ron, as we continue ruffle some feathers, what's got my feathers ruffled up is the NHL scheduling. Ron, go ahead and take a look at tonight's schedule across all of sports. Go and take a look at it, and there is one NHL game. Now, there's been plenty of staggered scheduling, and there's travel that's involved in logistics and all of that, and I totally get it. However, where we are in what should be a sweet spot for the NHL to increase its exposure, here's a scenario. The NFL is done. No more. Not even Super Bowl coverage, off-week stuff. No MLB yet. Pitchers and catchers are reporting, but there are no actual spring training games going on yet. It's NBA All-Star Weekend. All right. Well, sure, the NBA is a big audience, but are they really drawing that many people to the celebrity game and the Rising Stars game? I don't know. Either way, put yourself up against that, right? Other than that, there's only 15 college basketball games tonight, and that is light for college basketball. There are 7, go and look at like Saturday, and there's over 100, right? It's ridiculous. Okay. College baseball season opener today. I went and looked at where you can actually watch them. About the only one I could find on MLB Network that I got on right now, Ohio State versus Boston College. And that's just about wrapping up now. Wouldn't even interfere with the early slate of NHL games here, Ron. One game, and it's the weirdest matchup. Carolina visiting the Arizona Coyotes.
Yep.
And it's at 8 o'clock Central Time here, since we're at Chicago time. We'll lead with that. But 9 o'clock Eastern Time, since that's what the rest of the media hype likes to run on. So you're not even getting the base audience in a primetime slot there, right? Because 7:30 Eastern Time would probably be the sweet spot right in the middle there. My question is, what are we worried about? Are we worried about college baseball's opening day? Are we worried about NBA All-Star Weekend's celebrity game and Rising Stars game? Why not expand your exposure in this little window that you have? Because guess what? Baseball is going to start ramping up, and you're going to have a lot of people that maybe would possibly casually watch hockey tonight. They'll be much more inclined to dial into a Friday night spring training game as the Dodgers and Padres ramp up early for their, series over in South Korea, right? It's absolutely asinine to me that the NHL isn't taking advantage of this specific window on this specific weekend here. And I just read off to you all the factors why. But don't worry, they had 12 games yesterday, and they have 13 tomorrow, kind of like when they tried to jam 15 in on an NFL wildcard weekend. It's absolutely ridiculous, Ron.
Yeah, I think one thing we've learned, Johnny, when it comes to the schedule makers of the NHL is they're not incredibly good at their job. And I get it. You're trying to compete with certain things, and it's understandable during like the playoff weekend, right? The Chicago Blackhawks, after that early January Sunday game, don't play a Sunday game at period, let alone at home, until the game on the 25th when they retire Chris Chelios' number. That was consciously done to avoid NFL weekends with those Sundays. I get that. That's fine. But I agree with you, Johnny. I don't know what it is. The NHL just, for some reason, does not like to play hockey on Friday nights, and I don't get that. I really don't. To me, the AHL does it right? The AHL survives because they play games on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Like, they play when you're going to get the most people to tune in and come to your games. Now, I get it. Thursday nights aren't terrible, right? Like, a little early week hockey is always nice to break up the course of a work week. But why aren't there more games on a Friday night, Johnny? I completely agree with you. I think you have a hell of a point here.
I mean, what the only thing they got going for them is it's on NHL Network, but even that, it's like,
and not everybody even has NHL Network,
right? There's that, and then I understand NBA probably gets a big share for ESPN, TNT. I don't even know where the hell their All-Star festivities are broadcast on, but either way, it's the precursor events. It's not even the dunk contest, the 3-point contest, anything like that. Rising Stars game. Are you really jacked up to see Adama Sanogo over for the Bulls just because he plays for Windy City over in the Rising Stars game, or would you rather watch a professional hockey game?
Give me the hockey.
Come on. It just drives me nuts. So that's what's ruffling my feathers here. All right, let's go a little more positive. Let's give out some stick taps. Who did something right this week, Ron? We talked about a lot of wrong. Who did something right?
Well, I'm going to satirically talk about something that was done right. And the Pittsburgh Penguins and the hockey gods robbed me out of a free $135 last night, Johnny, because I was feeling good. I needed something. It was a rough work week. It was just a rough week in general. I was a little annoyed with the people on the road, I think, as most of us that drive on the road on any given night can agree and understand. And I just wanted to win some cash. And the beautiful people at FanDuel gave me a bonus bet, just a little $5 one, just a little, nothing too crazy. But I was like, let's see what happens. My gut told me Sidney Crosby was going to score. In fact, I looked over at my girlfriend at last night's game, and I went, I have a bad feeling about the start of this game. I'm ready for, Crosby just to walk down the left wing boards and just, roof one over the goaltender's shoulder. He didn't do that, but he tipped it over the goalie's shoulder. So
got himself into the soft area. And
we were kind of on point with that one. So that was a check mark. I was like, well, if anybody's going to score tonight, not named number 98, it's going to be Philip Kurashev. Bing, that one scored. And I was sitting there, and I'm like, at this point, I don't even care if they fucking lose. I just need number 98 to put a puck in the back of the net. And they couldn't do it. and I lost out on a really nice opportunity. So I was a little bummed by that. So a satirical stick tap to the Pittsburgh Penguins for ruining that opportunity for me. But I will give a big stick tap to our comment section, Johnny, because they have been absolutely in fuego. Skokes 98, my good old boy Joe on the comments. I haven't seen Joe in a while. How are you, buddy? We appreciate you guys, especially on a Friday afternoon, right? A lot of people are getting ready for the weekend, doing different things. You guys are here with us at Four Feathers in the comment section. Big stick taps to you guys, and we appreciate you guys jumping in and enhancing the conversation as a part of our Friday night happy hour.
Yep, absolutely. You're here, locked in. Hawks Happy Hour with the Four Feathers podcast. All right, Ron, my stick tap for this week goes out to Elliot Friedman because he broke. He was first with that Bedard scoop on Thursday morning, 9:35 a.m. Central Time was when he had said the Blackhawks and Bedard are exploring that return with, checking in with doctors to see if he could come back against the Penguins. This shot Elliott way back up to the top of the NHL beat reporter power rankings, Ron. Some other guys had some scoops. Weeksy does some good stuff. Chris Johnson is right on top of waiver news every single day. So some guys had risen their stock, but Elliott, bang, right back up to the top of that board. And I can tell you what, he made a lot of Blackhawks fans real happy when he broke that news out on Thursday morning. So stick taps go out to Friedge. Elliot Friedman, however you want to spell it, 2 T's, 3 T's, 4 L's, whatever it is.
17 consonants. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. You know the drill. Like have fun with that, Ron.
A quick one here too from 98. His stick tap goes to number 98, and he says for coming back early and getting the people keep getting the people going. Johnny.
Connor Bedard shattered our. If we go back and listen to a couple previous,
crushed it.
He crushed we did the prediction game, just like Kaylee Chelios and Charlie Meliotis did back before the All-Star break. And we had done ours. If you didn't listen to that episode, I had predicted next Wednesday, which is the 21st against Philadelphia, national TV game on TNT, yada, yada. That was my whole reasoning. You had the Friday night return against Winnipeg, thinking that would get him at least one game before that big, highly anticipated one against for the Chris Chelios jersey retirement, Patrick Kane return, and that is the game that Tony, our other co-host, picked for Connor Bedard's return. So stick taps also go to 98 for shattering those expectations, predictions, what have you. All right, Ron, as we wrap up here, we, as per usual, we look at what's on tap next. A couple of games coming up here. Saturday, it's the worst day ever against Ottawa Senators, 2:00. If you haven't listened to the show before, you're not a fan of matinee games, but this is what it is. This is how they scheduled it. So I'm sure they're going to have a lot of kid-involved stuff here. This is just what they do. But they're coming in 2:00 Central Time. That game will be on NBC Sports Chicago on Saturday. And then their lone road game of February on Monday, visiting the Carolina Hurricanes, 6:00 on Monday, February 19th, also on NBC Sports Chicago. As we usually do here, Ron, how do you see these playing out for the Hawks?
Yeah, Johnny, you know what? I think it finally comes to an end. Saturday afternoon against a pretty abysmal Ottawa team, in my humble opinion. The Blackhawks get it done. Connor Bedard shows up and shows out. We get, as Skoke said much earlier, Bubble Bedsy. We get Bubble Bedard. Because as you pointed out, and as our Four Feathers account pointed out, Johnny, the last time Connor Bedard wore a bubble, he went absolutely bad shit crazy in the World Juniors with 23 points in 7 games or something crazy like that. I think they get it done on Saturday. So I'm gonna go 1-1 because I think Carolina beats them. Carolina is just a really good hockey team, but I think they managed to do it. It's a home game. Connor Bedard's ready to show up and show out. They get the dub. 1-1, Johnny. 1-1.
Yeah, you know what, Ron? I'm going to echo you here. And it's a lot because Connor Bedard is back. That is the driving force here. And I think he'll be ready to go positionally from the drop of this one. And maybe he doesn't have to start this one since the return and all the fanfare was already played out on Thursday night. So then he can just settle in. And Luke Richardson can play his matchups from the beginning, like we talked about. But the Ottawa Senators, they don't do much right. About the best they do is Brady Tkachuk gets under guys' skin. That's really about it. Right? Like you'll go look at Ottawa and they're in that lottery, but in a worse position than us because they're not tanking enough. which they honestly probably should have done when they realized that shit was hitting the fan earlier on in the season. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Hawks to get a dub in that one and then lose to the more skilled playoff bound Carolina Hurricanes, even though they're a random team that I just despise, Ron. I don't know why. I think their fans are pretty annoying. I don't like the Carolina Hurricanes. It's not even that they can.
You don't like the storm surge?
I mean, I don't really care either way. I think they've done. There's like some funny clips that have come out of that, but for whatever reason, their fans have been like annoying on social media, and then they're also never built for the playoffs. So
yeah, well, Johnny, in fairness, Carolina is starving for something good in sports because the Carolina Panthers are a horrific dumpster fire, and the Charlotte Hornets are no better than they were when they were the Charlotte Bobcats.
Yeah, so that's what you got coming up on tap next, Ron. It was great talking to you. A little Hawks happy hour here on a Friday afternoon. I hope you, all of your listeners, thanks for joining the comment section. We appreciate you as always. So you can join us in the future. Go check out On Tap Sportsnet on YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, all the platforms. Go and follow us at On Tap Sportsnet, at Four Feathers Pod. And as always, OnTapSportsNet.com is your home for all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. All right, Ron, that'll wrap it up. Everyone have a good weekend. And until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.